1,160 submissions for just one, and only one can win. So I don't know, you do the math. And I think at least 30 poems were certainly publishable out of that 1160.
You're listening to The Publishing Table, a segment of the Gather Poets podcast, where we explore how poems and books move from the page into the world. Here, poets, editors, agents, and publishers join in conversation, offering an honest look at publishing and the choices and challenges writers face along the way. I'm your host, Hannah Levy, a writer, editor, and proud member of the Gather Poets community. Today, I'm here with Karan Kapoor, editor-in-chief of Only Poems, an independent online poetry magazine that's built a vibrant community around contemporary poetry. What makes Only Poems special is how much space it gives both the poems and the poets themselves. Alongside curated portfolios of work, readers get in-depth interviews that dig into craft and process. It's a space that champions emerging and established voices alike, pays its contributors, and treats poetry not as something distant or academic, but as something alive and deeply human. We love Only Poems so much because Karan and his partner Shannon are committed to fostering a literary culture outside traditional gatekeeping models. Hi, thank you so much for joining us. I know everyone in the Gather community is just so excited to hear from you about Only Poems and your background and your vision for the Lit Mag. So thank you for joining, Karan, and we're just so happy that you're here. I guess to get started, can you just share a little bit about what led you to founding Only Poems and a little bit about your own background as a writer?
Sure, Hannah, thank you for having me. My wife and I, we were just starting our MFA. I was starting my MFA. Shannon actually started it a year after me, but we were here in Blacksburg, and we had been submitting for a while. I think I should probably start with my background as a writer. I started writing. It was a way for me to learn the language. I grew up in a household where nobody spoke English, so it was foreign to me. But I was in high school when a friend of mine and I wrote a paper together, which was a really wonderful experience. It was an essay, and that experience made me feel that it was fun to write. So we wanted to just experiment with that. And I was a pretty depressed kid and kind of hated education and everybody around me. So I wanted to do something that nobody else was doing, and writing a book seemed like the right thing to do. So we spent 4 years writing a novel, and that's how I got into writing. But then when my grandmother died, all my writing turned to poetry somehow.
Wow.
And it was then when I quote unquote became a poet. I think, I don't know if I still am a poet, but that's when I started writing poetry. Anyhow, so we would submit a lot of work. Shannon is a very good submitter, or used to be. We don't have any more time to do any of this, but we used to send out work quite a bit, and we were lucky enough to publish in a lot of magazines. What we found very soon was that we were very disappointed by most magazines and where we were published, and how unappealing things looked on the websites of various magazines, or how cold the editing process or the communication was, how there was no intimacy in the process, it seemed. And then we would complain amongst each other, and we would bitch about how terrible most magazines are. So we realized that, we just challenged ourselves. How hard could it be? And if, rather than complaining and whining, maybe we start a project and see how difficult it is. And if it is difficult, then we will know and why this is the case. So we thought, sure, why not? Let's start a magazine.
How was that initial transition from writer, poet to editor for you, being on the other side for the first time? And I know you said that you don't know if you would call yourself a poet anymore. So we can follow, I want to follow up with you about that too.
Um, Well, there was no transition really, in the sense that uh, I've always been a champion of good work. I think I take pride, some little pride in the fact that I can tell what's good and what's not good, whether it comes to music or art in general. Um, feel like I'm opinionated, at at least in my own head, about what I like and what I don't like. So I've always imposed my favorite song and my favorite poems on my people, so to speak, on my friends and my lovers, and it was always uh, it always seemed the kind of thing I wanted to do anyway. So it's not really a transition. It's just, as a poet, and a writer, I am a reader first. And as a
Mm.
reader of work, I'm a champion of work. And as an editor slash curator, I suppose, I get to do a lot of that, and it's very gratifying. I don't really see it as a divide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also a lit mag editor. I find that sometimes redoing all of the reading work that's required actually makes me understand where I can improve in my own writing. Right, like the voice that jumps out from the page is becomes really obvious when you're sorting through hundreds, thousands of submissions. Um,
I have
yeah,
to say, I got copies of the Revis, and I am such a fan. Those 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 issues look brilliant. Shannon was, we were kind of at first we were envious, and then we were just proud. It's just brilliant work.
oh,
Yeah,
thank you. The mutual adoration goes both ways because I'm such a fan, and the whole Gather community is such a fan of Only Poems. And for listeners who might be new here to Only Poems, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you describe its editorial vision, um, and kind of what if you think the platform is evolving or where you might be putting energy towards as you grow.
yeah. We When we started Only Poems, we had this one clear idea that because most magazines we were following and we loved were following a poem a day sort of model, or like when you pick up a magazine, you usually find 15, 16 poems by, say, 13, 14 poets. What I would end up finding is that I would like one or two poems and I would want to read a lot more of that poet. So, and we kind of read obsessively. When you like something, you want to, if you like a song, you want to go and hear the album. So it's, I think, natural to want to get to know a voice a little more. So we decided very early on that we wanted to follow a poet a week model as opposed to a poem. So we decided that we will publish a portfolio alongside an extensive interview, because I think for when I was younger, um, I think for readers who are young and really want to learn and do not have much resources to attend, say, workshops that can be expensive, or to go to school that can be really expensive, if you cannot afford that kind of privilege, the only resource you have are books or interviews of writers, your favorite writers. And I know a lot of the Paris Review has some great writers, and I know I have a Nigerian friend who who's who told me that in 2014 they took off their paywall for a day, and so many of his friends in Lagos, they took screenshots after screenshots of those interviews so that they won't have to pay once that paywall was reintroduced. So it was it is from that spark that we are doing this for those kids in New Delhi or Lagos, or people who cannot afford the Paris Review subscription. We want these interviews to be accessible to them, and that kind of knowledge that comes from it.
Yeah, it really feels like a community in that sense, not just a literary magazine. It feels like this kind of place where people can connect with other people, right? And so that's one of the things I really love about it. And I'm curious, so for the Poet a Week, How many submissions on average are you getting for that? And I'm just curious about um, what makes a poet really stand out to you as you're sorting through all of those.
We are lucky and we get a lot of submissions, and maybe that is a double-edged sword, but um, so we open for 2 weeks, twice in a year for the Poet of the Week for free submissions. But earlier we were open pretty much all the time, and we were averaging about 1,500 submissions a month, which can be a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
So we at first we were reading everything by ourselves, but then slowly the team started growing. We put out a call for readers, and then so many people volunteered, and then we are lucky to have about 2 dozen readers even now, and there were 40 at some point, but now about 20 readers, and they do the job pretty well. We have some assistant editors, and it's it's been easier. What stands out really is the voice and the skill, but it truly is it is the most difficult question an editor gets asked, I think, because um, I don't know if it's duende or what it is, but it is something inexplicable, and you cannot articulate what really truly works about a poem. It's it's alive in a way that most pieces are just not, and also most pieces are just terribly written. I teach undergrads, and I see their writing, and I love my students, and they are fantastic in many ways, but their writing is terrible, and there's no way around it. It comes from a lot of practice. Is People want to be writers because they think it's cool, and it's pretty cool that being a writer is considered cool, but it is a lot of hard work that uh, people just don't acknowledge or want to put in.
Yeah. So would you say there's not really any like patterns that you find in poems that really work? It's just really unique to each set of poems that get submitted for that poet of the week, or do you kind of sense a, I don't know, I guess not a theme, but like a continuous like, I don't know, quality, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I understand what you're trying to get at, and I think it's more that there are patterns in work that is not good, and
Mm.
work, for instance, riddled with cliches or poor syntax, over explaining things that do not need to be explained, under or obscuring things that really need some attention. These are some things that are common between poems that just do not, leave a mark. Whereas with poems that do, it is that inexplicable, inarticulatable, I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
word, quality to those poems where it's like it's alive on the page, and you feel something, and this person has got it. I don't know what it is, but I know when I see it, and I know that the person has it, or yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and I think it's helpful to hear what doesn't work. I know that there's a lot of times where you're passing on a submission just because of sheer volume of submissions you're getting, and maybe you've mentioned to someone that they were a finalist, for example, or um, I'm just curious if you decline a poem, is it like a decline forever? Or is it just a no in comparison to the pool? Because I think our listeners are interested in knowing if you're open to seeing a piece more than once if it's been revised.
Absolutely. One thing I realized after starting this is that if you get a special rejection, you must take it seriously, because I know for a fact that I don't have the time when I'm marking up, I don't know, 2,000 rejections to really sort out the special ones from the form rejections, So when
Oh,
I
yeah, no,
do
trust
take out
me,
the
I
time,
take my special rejections from only poems very soon. Those are my favorite
right,
those are our favorite
I
rejections.
because I mean them, and I think a receiver can tell. I actually get a lot of responses for my rejections, which is a little strange because I don't know always how to respond to them. But people really take them seriously, and it is gratifying to know that even though we are saying no to a group of poems, we are letting people know that, they actually left a mark and they reached up high in the discussion. And I am always, I think we have published many poems we have rejected at first. Many. Especially for the things like Poem of the Month, when we know that we can only publish one poem. And this last month, we got our record number of submissions, which was 1,160 submissions for just one, and only one can win. So I don't know, you do the math. And I think at least 30 poems were certainly publishable out of that 1160. And out of the 30, we can only do one. So I always make sure to let people know that, you can always send it again for either Quote of the Week, or feel free to revise, send it elsewhere. We don't feel protected, or we don't feel possessive in the sense that, oh, just only send us, as in only poems, all your good work. I want to see good work everywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter if you send it to us or not. It just matters that you send it somewhere where you have some readership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what that process is like, getting from, so you talk about like the 1100 that you got for this last, I think it was for the love theme, right? For
Correct.
February. And
That's an
then
easy
you
theme
narrow,
as well.
yeah, sure. It can be complicated, but and then you narrow it down to 30 and you have this group of small, a much smaller group to vet. What does it look like amongst the readers and editorial team of Only Poems? Is it like a discussion? I'm just curious to kind of understand how you go from that group to then the selection.
That's very good, Hannah. I think a lot of people are curious, and I've had readers kind of who wanted to have this kind of involvement. And in the beginning, there was a time when we were voting on the top 10
Oh.
poems or the top 20 poems. But very soon I realized that I am too protective of my editorial vision, and uh, I want to be the one to choose. Sometimes, if say there have been times when the top 30, I have had to look elsewhere. I could not find what I wanted in the
Mm.
top 30 or the top 50. So I look at everything. And I usually do look at everything because I kind of feel that fear of missing out on a really fantastic piece that somebody might have missed out on. So there's no discussion. It's just all in my head. Sometimes if I am confused between two poems, I read them out to Shannon, or I ask our managing editor, Svetlana, for help. But that hasn't happened in a while. I think I'm getting more and more sure of what I want to do and what I want to publish.
That's interesting. How do you read the poems that are selected out loud to your, like, oh, when you're alone, or is that more of like an internal reading for you?
No, I read them aloud as well, especially when like I said, when I'm confused. Something that strikes as the absolute winner, you don't have to do too much with that. But if there are two really strong contenders, then it always helps to read a
Yeah.
poem aloud. I do that with my own work, and it helps.
And for those longer features that you're doing, like the Poet of the Week, and people are submitting, 10 poems at once in a grouping, are you looking for thematic cohesion across those poems? Like, do you want them to speak to each other, or does diversity in form and voice and theme make any difference to you?
I hesitate to answer this because if I answer it, and if there are people who are listening, maybe they would want to, follow my cues. And I don't want anybody to follow my cues. But of late, I've realized that it is in fact true that somehow a series of poems ends up being interesting to me.
Mm.
But in the beginning, I used to say that, I want to see a range, and I want to see what all that you can do. On the other hand, when somebody sends me a 10-page packet, I don't remember the last time I sent a straight up acceptance. I usually send a message that says, send me 20 pages, and then I will select. And many times I have to just say no to the 20-page submissions and break people's hearts. But I'm a grocer of despair, as I say.
Well, it's okay. I appreciate the fact that there's a little bit of like alchemy and magic happening that you don't necessarily want to, or even sometimes can as an editor myself. I know it's hard to articulate. I guess a question kind of around that then is with so many voices in front of you, with so many voices in your head, with all these submissions, like what are some of your own personal practices to kind of keep that curation channel clear so that you can listen to your intuition? Like, I guess, yeah, I would just be curious to hear a little bit about that. Like, you have this editorial intuition of like, I like this, I don't like this. Do you have any like, I don't know, spiritual or grounding practices, or how do you approach that?
I think I just read a lot is what I do. I want to keep my mind clear, because sometimes when you read the slush, you get so tired and angry and frustrated reading shitty poems after shitty poems I always make it a point to pick a physical book and just, read some of my favorite poets, just to know what I'm looking for. I
Mhm.
At the same time, I also want to challenge my own biases, in the sense that I always want to be publishing work that is not exactly my cup of tea, so to speak. I want to push myself as well in in my curation, that it's not just the same stuff. I think one thing that people have noticed, and I'm glad that they have, is that we are eclectic. I think all magazines like to think they're eclectic and they want to say it. And everybody tries, like two similar pieces you rarely find in a magazine. But from one poet to another, I think a lot of we hear a lot of that, oh wow, I did not expect that. And that
Mhm.
kind of surprise is also what you're looking for in a submission. You asked earlier, and I didn't say this, but when you're reading something and you want to be surprised, the expected stuff is usually not interesting.
Yeah. On that note, what what risks do you wish more poets would take? I guess risk and surprise to me go hand in hand a little bit. So would be curious.
uh I don't want to be an ass, but I find myself disagreeing with this idea of risk when we talk
Mm.
about poetry. I don't know. I think uh, the
No, say
the
more.
per-
What I think this is great. I love contrary opinions. What say? I'm curious. So like unpack that a little bit. Yeah.
I think a person who's, I don't know, cleaning, hanging from a, I don't know, hanging off a rope and cleaning a window outside, I don't know, on a tall building and on the 83rd floor, is taking a risk. And the term in my head, I understand when people speak about emotional risks, but if we were, I don't know, if I were Lorca or Anna Akhmatova, then I would understand what risk I'm taking by writing against the regime, so to speak. And I guess America is moving toward that kind of weird uh, regime, that you would probably be risking your life if you were to speak against it. And then it would probably be a truer sense of risk, when you actually risk your life, you actually risk your well-being, you risk your children's well-being. And that kind of risk, I hope I never have to take. And I think we are very privileged to be able to writing in a time when we can speak against whatever it is that we want to write against or speak against, and we can write our slogans and scream our truth without truly ever risking anything.
Mhm.
And I feel scared, and I hope that can remain. But if it changes, then sure, then we'll talk about risk in poetry. And then when we say stuff that is truly, that can truly, I don't know, topple a government or burn banks or, I don't know, provoke a revolution, and then we'll see then. I don't know
Yeah,
because I
we can
think
have a follow-up conversation. Maybe that's a follow-up conversation around politics and poetry because that's a whole different that's a whole different topic that I mean, obviously love to speak to, but, I think we're not gonna have time to unpack that here. But I do appreciate what you're saying, and I think maybe just the language choice around risk is, that's on
I think
me.
so. No, not at all. I think what people usually end up meaning is the kind of emotional risk somebody takes, or if you are experimenting enough with your form or with your voice, and that
Yeah,
is
like
always
pushing
welcome.
language.
That is
Yeah,
always,
I guess
as long as you have good reason to do that. I think mm, it's all a plus.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because I wanna talk about the publishing, ecosystem right now. Because you mentioned in the very beginning that you founded Only Poems because as writers, you were frustrated with the quality of the world of the publishing, the world of publishing of lit mags. And so I'm curious to hear, since you do have so many opinions, which I love, what are your thoughts on the current publishing ecosystem for like a debut poet who's trying to like break in and make their mark and get published for the first time?
I think there are all sorts of avenues, and all of them have some kind of value, but they become more and more difficult to enter into because the debut poet who is trying to break into any of these places has a million other competitors, so to
Mhm.
speak. And I wish it wasn't the case that we were all friends and we were not competing for little spaces. But there is an element of scarcity that this industry operates with or has to operate with because like the example being we got 1160 submissions for poem of the month. We were only able to publish one just by I don't know logistical just for logistical reasons. But I'm a champion of self-publishing in not really vanity publishing, and I think all self-publishing is in some way vanity publishing. But what I mean is uh, social media can be used to some of you all people are gather, you all are doing so well putting your little poems and making, changing people's lives in small ways. And I think there's so much beauty in that. I mean, not waiting for a stupid magazine, stupid editor, taking your poem or not taking your poem. I think that doesn't matter at all. I think, in fact, most of you all's poems that get even a little bit traction on social media, they probably find a lot more readers than any magazine really does, at least any mid-tier magazine, if you just let go of the really big ones, if you just ignore the reputation that comes with the New Yorker or the Paris Review. After that, I think most magazines barely have any readership. I think most of the readership is consisted of people who actually want to publish in that magazine or have published in that magazine. So it's a shame, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the encouragement around self-publishing. I think it gives me so much more hope when I see an editor say that they're open to having a poem that someone has published on their own platform, like put up on their own website or a Substack, rather than dismiss it entirely because it was posted once to Instagram like 3 months ago or something like that.
Absolutely. It really is sad that that happens. It's again, it is the same scarcity mentality operating there, and I do not like it at all. From the very get-go, we knew that, we had no trouble reprinting poems that have published in other magazines or taking poems that have appeared on blogs or whatever. It's our nobody really owns poetry, if you think about it, when you find poetry belongs to the people, and the fact that we try to, or that these institutions have tried to change that is sad. I have more terrible words, but I'm not going to use them.
Are there, and you feel free to not answer this question, but are there any other like lit mags or spaces that give you hope? Like I know Only Poems is your project, and of course that's a big focus for you. But I'm sure writers listening to this podcast would love to hear from you about if there's other spaces that you're interested in or that you feel like have models that are doing great things.
Well, all projects give me hope in that sense because I think whoever does this sort of thing does it from a place of love and a place of true volunteership because nobody is getting rich off of this, and maybe some people are, but nobody's really in it for the money or you spend so much effort on the rebus, and it's such a fantastic object. It's an art object alongside the pieces themselves. It's literature, but it's also art, and um, the kind of effort that you spend, and say maybe 100 people read that, um, it's it's nowhere equal to the effort you put into it, the fruit that comes from it, so to speak. But you still do it because you love to do it, and you are in it for the love of literature, the love of words, the love of art. And I think everybody that does this, I think there are like what 4,000 magazines that are listed on many databases. That's an insane amount of magazine. I kind of wish there were a lesser number of magazines and more people volunteered their time toward other institutions that they actually like. But then I think, why didn't I myself do that? It's just that some institutions make it so hard to for anybody to just enter that people just end up thinking, you know what, I'll start my own thing. And I think there's it's pretty cool. It really is
Yeah.
cool that so many people do this.
I mean, I do think the sheer volume of submissions that I see for our lit mag, but then also there's that I'm hearing about for Only Poems as well. Like there are so many writers out there. I do that. It does make me feel. I don't know. It kind of makes me feel like we're holding hands around the world somehow.
Correct.
um,
That's a beautiful
and
way to look
poets
at
are
it.
the
And I
best
love it.
people to hold hands with.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Uh,
That's a very generous way of looking at this. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, so, okay, going back to the beginning of this conversation where you mentioned that,
Sorry, before you switch gears,
no,
I didn't mean to be diplomatic or whatever or pragmatic by not answering or not naming any names. I love what Gather does. I love what 32 Poems does. I love AGNI, and I love many magazines. We follow a lot, like we follow on the footsteps of Rattle and December magazine, which I think closed, unfortunately. But yeah,
yeah,
we have 1,000 magazines, and we have our eyes everywhere because we want to see what everybody's doing and what we can, improve for our own magazines.
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Um, Now I forgot what I was saying. Oh, right.
My
Back.
apologies, my sincere
No, that's
apologies.
no, because now I have a follow up question for you because I know you're going to AWP soon, right? It's soon, and
Correct.
I'm just curious, like, what do you like? Yeah. What do you get out of like networking and being in community with other lit mags? The idea of, like you said, you have your eyes on these different publications. Like, do you have ideas for ways that you're growing Only Poems or things you want to try at Only Poems that you've seen other lit mags do? Or are you just kind of just staying, current with what their mission, editorial missions are?
I think we do pretty much everything anybody can do for a lit mag. I think we do a lot. And in fact, we do a bit too much, and we should probably like tone it down a little bit. But it's just, it's not so much an equation as it is a source of inspiration that people really do this for the love of it. And that's a little stupid but largely amazing and inspiring. And
Yeah.
we are going to AWP, and we are so excited to meet so many of our favorite poets again. And then that's why we go, just to hang out with them. It just becomes an excuse. to meet these people that we really love and like spending time with.
Yeah, I bet because
It's
it's so rewarding being in person. I'm bummed that I'm missing it. I think next year I'll probably make an effort to go, but I just know what it feels like to do everything online, and then you get in a room with physical bodies and energy, and
Yes,
it's a very different experience.
correct.
So anyway, well, Gather might be doing we might be doing more readings in person. So maybe we'll be in your area at some point and we can all hang out. um, so yeah, I did want to circle back to that question that I had around you mentioned in the very beginning you may not identify as a poet anymore, or you alluded to something like that. And I'm curious. It just sparked there was a little light that went off in my head because I was kind of like, I want to know
That's not
more
what
about.
I'm. No, that's not what I meant. I just meant that what is a poet? That I was just waxing poetic or philosophical.
I
I didn't mean anything. Yeah, I mean
Well, because I'm
it's just
curious
a
about the
term.
idea of like you're running this magazine that takes up so much of your time. You also do a lot of your own writing, I assume. I know you did before. So I'm curious about balancing that and what you're personally working on within your own writing.
Thank you. I wish I was better at the balance, but I suck at it. And for almost 2 years, I didn't write much at all. But I'm a slow writer, and I think the
Mm.
more I reckon with that, I feel better. I've been working on a book for 7 years, and I revise and edit a lot, and I'm constantly editing. The book got taken by Alice James recently, so I don't think, yeah, I'm continuing to work on it on the edits. But there's that, and I've been recently writing some prayers. But
Mm.
I suck at the balance, and I'm mostly occupied by the magazine, and there's always so much to do.
It is very deeply relatable to hear you say you're a slow writer because I am a very slow writer, painfully slow writer, and I'm a fast editor. I am very good at collaborating and editing and giving my feedback and opinions. And then writing is like deep excavation that is like so slow and sometimes I think is working backwards. So
Yes.
just very relatable to hear you say that, and I think it's really interesting to be working on both ends of it, and I'm excited about your book, so I'll be keeping my eyes. We'll all be looking out for that.
Thank you, Hannah. That's sweet of you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, it's so great to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time and for your honesty and for peeling back the layers behind Only Poems a little bit. I think lit mags have a little bit of a mystique about them, especially when they're notoriously fantastic quality and competitive and difficult to get published in. So I just want to say thank you so much for spending some time with the Gather community today.
Of course, I'm always here for you guys. I love what you all do.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Publishing Table. If you're curious about Gather, feel free to find us on Instagram at Gather Poets, and we look forward to connecting.